As I mentioned before, this movie, Shadowlands, is the one which made me fall in love with Anthony Hopkins. Not necessarily that it's my top favorite from his catalog, but it holds a special place for me partly because of that. Directed by Sir Richard Attenborough and released in the United States on Christmas Day 1993, this movie is, we could say, very loosely based on the life of C.S. Lewis and his marriage to Joy Davidman Gresham. I emphasize loosely because the movie begins by saying, this true story takes place in the university city of Oxford, 1952. And, well, it does, and it's true. The movie does not depict a 100% accurate picture of Mr. Lewis or Miss Gresham and their relationship, but just briefly, I'll mention a few of the liberties taken. The real Joy didn't have just one son, but two, David and Douglas. The correspondence between Lewis and Joy lasted for 10 years, not for a mere 2 as in the movie. Lewis's reservations toward modern machinery, and especially automobiles, is totally ignored. Here's something he once wrote. The truest and most horrible claim made for modern transport is that it annihilates space. It does. It annihilates one of the most glorious gifts we have been given. It is a vile inflation which lowers the value of distance so that a modern boy travels 100 miles with less sense of liberation and pilgrimage and adventure than his grandfather got from traveling 10. Well, there you have his true feelings. Lewis's total commitment to the Christian faith in his private life, university life, and as a public persona is almost absent from the movie, but you wouldn't expect an Oxford professor to be a devoted Christian, would you? Actually, Lewis and Joy shared their personal belief in the gospel, an aspect which is again missing from the movie. The way the movie presents Lewis's apologetics, we could easily conclude that his Christian faith was either something passed on to him by tradition or perhaps merely a sort of side hobby. Imagine making a movie about Michael Schumacher in which there is but just a little reference to driving and racing. And the list could go on. This is not to say, of course, that it's a bad movie or that it doesn't offer us an introduction to Lewis's life and the beautiful story of his relationship with Joy Gresham. And if this movie inspires a few people to at least read his autobiography entitled Surprised by Joy, well then, it's a win. But we should understand that the movie is actually not set up to relate history point by point and line by line, but rather to make a point. That will enable us to not just forgive the screenwriter, but to truly appreciate the wonderful job he's done. And now, before I dive into the plot, I'll do my usual and say that if you haven't watched this movie yet, do pause this video and go watch it first. One of my previous videos, I guess it was the Book of Eli, one of my patrons, Lee Kennison, commented that the story was intriguing, so he cheated and watched the entire review, even though he hadn't seen the movie. Look, it's okay for you to do whatever you want, of course, but I do believe that one really must watch this movie to really appreciate the depths of the story and the message and the love that is presented in it, that it portrays. So while you do that, I'm going to play a little excerpt from the soundtrack and see whether you can spot it in the movie. Well, the plot is simple. In the 1950s, a reserved middle-aged bachelor, C.S. Lewis, an Oxford University fellow and tutor, meets the married American poet Joy Gresham and her young son Douglas during their visit to England, not yet being aware of the circumstances of Joy's troubled marriage. What begins as a formal meeting between the two very different minds gradually develops into a friendship and eventually love. Lewis finds his quiet life with his brother Warnie disrupted by the outspoken Joy, whose uninhibited, let's say, very American behavior sharply contrasts with the rigid sensibilities of the male-dominated English university. Each provides the other with new ways of viewing the world. When Joy is diagnosed with cancer, Jack faces his deeper feelings for her, and the two of them marry. Jack's beliefs are tested as Joy tries to prepare him for her death, which seems to have moved Lewis from the comfortable safety of his desk out into the real experiences of life. So now that we have the plot fresh in our minds, let's start by looking at the best scene. Jack is talking to his friend and fellow professor, Harry, about the prospect of Joy's death. Harry feels for Jack and tries to engage in a conversation about what will happen with Douglas after Joy's death. Now we have to remember that Jack and Joy were not yet married. Well, they were married, but only technically married, strictly for the purpose of making it possible for Joy and Douglas to legally live in England. But Jack's university colleagues were not aware of this legal arrangement on the one hand, while on the other, neither Jack nor Joy were romantically involved at this point. After Jack dismisses the possibility of Douglas returning to his father, Harry advances the idea of other relatives and then tries to tell Jack that...
it's not as if...
It's not as if what, Harry?
Well, she's your friend, of course. But, well, she's not family.
And then Jack says it out loud.
She's not my wife.
No, of course not.
Of course not. It's impossible. It's unthinkable.
Impossible. Unthinkable. Right? How could this old academic bachelor have a wife? Oh, but it's more than that.
How could Joy be my wife? I'd have to love her, wouldn't I? I'd have to care more for her than for anyone else in this world.
And that, Jack defining a particular element of the nature of romantic love, exclusivity. Jack is, of course, in tears, as this is the moment in which he first comes to recognize the nature of his love for Joy.
I'm sorry, Jack. I didn't know.
Nor did I, Harry.
There are so many great scenes in this movie. Why did I choose this one for the best? Well, I've always endeavored to recognize reality at the earliest possible moment. Love, hate, passion, whatever. But so many times it takes a shock, it takes pain to make us recognize the truth, to say it out loud and to act accordingly. We humans, we are so adept at avoiding the most precious, most desirable things within ourselves and between ourselves. This is often the case when it comes to love. And then we're so sorry for the time we've wasted, for the joy and love we've missed out on by not taking time to recognize, to appreciate, and to act accordingly. As both Jack and Joy said, it took that. It took Joy's impending death for Jack to not only recognize his love for her, but also to recover from his mother's death and dare to step out into the world and live again. And Anthony Hopkins is just marvelous in this scene, isn't he? Now, for the funniest scene. Before the moment where Jack recognizes this truth, the nature of his love for Joy, there are some other really nice scenes in which he is childishly embarrassed in Joy's presence. One of which is this. Jack and his brother accompany Joy to the train after her first visit, and he's lost, just like a little boy. And then, after Joy is finally in the train, Jack asks,
"Does one wait for the train to leave?"
Does one wait for the train to leave? It's funny in a pure, beautiful way. First love, first time falling in love. It's not the type of funny that makes one laugh, but rather a poignant, nostalgic, endearing kind of funny. Now for the saddest scene of the movie. We have plenty of those, but none hits harder than the one near the movie's end after Joy's death up in Jack's attic. Jack finally accepts that he has to rise above his own grief and talk to Douglas. He finds him in the attic and begins sharing his own experience when, as a boy, his mother died, and that his faith and prayers didn't work. Of course, the 9-year-old Douglas puts on a brave front, saying,
"I don't care."
Jack understands very well what is going on, and so he starts to tell Douglas how much he loved Douglas's mother.
I don't see why she had to get sick.
No, not me.
It cuts right to the heart. That little boy's innocence, his naivety. What's the point? It makes no sense. Why did she have to get sick? Because none of us wanted it, and yet she did.
Jack,
Mm-hmm.
do you believe in heaven?
Yes, I do.
I don't believe in heaven.
That's okay.
Without this part of the dialogue, the saddest scene wouldn't have the same impact, would it? Douglas says he doesn't believe in heaven, but
I sure would like to see her again.
Me too.
oh, the pain, the grief, the breaking down, and the two end up holding each other and sobbing together, and it's like we are watching two children. Yes, the old bachelor becomes a little child, and, well, widower now, somehow proving his point from his earlier lectures.
You see, we are like blocks of stone out of which the sculptor carves the forms of men. The blows of his chisel, which hurt us so much, are what make us perfect.
Now, moving on to the most unexpected turn of the movie, I guess this one is going to be a bit unexpected. Douglas goes up to Jack's attic and is attracted by the old wardrobe there. He opens it, just like the children in Lewis's books, and tries to walk through the heavy old coats, expecting the back of the wardrobe to be a portal to the other world, to Narnia, which, of course, it isn't. Now, did I expect him to walk into a snow-covered forest through the back of the wardrobe? Of course not. So why then is this the most unexpected turn? Well, maybe you'll laugh, but here's why it is for me. It's because I didn't expect myself to be so strongly wishing for him to step into a snow-covered forest. That's why. And isn't it lovely to be surprised by how invested one has become in the experience of a movie character? The funniest line in this movie goes to Joy and her brash American sense of humor. When Jack first introduces her to his university colleagues, one of them, Professor Christopher Riley, displays the full potency of the British patriarchal attitude.
Well, yes. Now, I regard the soul as an essentially feminine accessory. Anima, quite different from animus, the male variant. This is how I explain the otherwise puzzling difference between the sexes. Where men have intellect, women have soul.
I mean, can it get any ruder? Keep in mind the context, please. The academic elite at Oxford, right? To which Joy replies,
As you say, Professor Riley, I'm from the United States, and different cultures have different modes of discourse. I need a little guidance here. Are you trying to be offensive or just merely stupid?
You can't help but love her for it. Now, for the best line. This one also goes to Joy. Jack repeats it at the end of the movie, but it is initially Joy's line. They're on their honeymoon, looking for that golden valley from the picture on Jack's wall, and when they find it, they begin to walk through the meadow together. Being England, of course it starts to rain, this time quite suddenly. They take shelter in an old open barn. That's where Jack tells Joy what is happiness for him.
No, I don't want to be somewhere else anymore. Not waiting for anything new to happen. Not looking around the next corner, no, the next hill. Here now. That's enough.
To which Joy adds that it is not going to last, talking of course about her imminent death. Jack acts a bit frustrated.
We shouldn't think about that now. Let's not spoil the time we have together.
Joy insists that acknowledging death as being a part of life makes it real. She wants to say it out loud, to place it there, in their reality, where it belongs, that she is going to die.
What I'm trying to say is that the pain then is part of the happiness now.
The pain now is part of the happiness then. That's it. I will not add anything to it. I'll just leave it to you. Now for my final thoughts. I believe that great works of art are eye-opening, revealing in more than one way. Like Shadowland. Friendship, love, care, the unexpected surprises in life which are often hidden in the most trivial moments.
It's all right, Warnie. She sails back to New York after Christmas.
It's only tea, Warnie. An hour or so of polite conversation, then we go home and everything goes on just the way it always has.
But it didn't, right? Let me know in the comments below what you think about Shadowlands, about the actors, the story, the gift that we find in this movie. Like and subscribe for more, many more, and I'll see you next time.